Thanks for tuning in to Courage and Faith, the new podcast from Patriot Mobile. I'm your host, Danielle Buck. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to highlight a few of Patriot Mobile's latest efforts and sponsorships that are making a difference around the country. Recently, we were honored to sponsor the Daniel Defense Fundraiser. This organization protects the Second Amendment by growing the number of Americans involved in shooting sports who understand the fundamentals of firearm safety and share the core value that the Second Amendment defends the rest. We also proudly sponsored Glenn Beck's Mercury One annual fundraiser. Mercury One partners with ministries and nonprofits around the globe to restore communities after natural disasters, rescues individuals from human trafficking and abuse, supports our veterans, and preserves and teaches American history. And Patriot Mobile sponsored Goldwater Institute's Freedom Gala in Arizona, which brought together champions of liberty from across the country for a night of celebration, purpose, and inspiration. And now we have a special interview for this podcast. We are going to talk to someone who has detransitioned. Chloe Cole, you are an amazing person. I heard your story, I think 2.5 years ago, and was so moved. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to have me here.
For sure. So what brings you to Texas?
So I'm here for quite a few different things, actually. I've been on the road for about 3 weeks now, just going around the country, speaking primarily at colleges. And so far, I've spoken at two different schools. And I was supposed to be speaking at TCU tomorrow, but they've made the Turning Point chapter that I've been working with jump through all sorts of different hoops to make it basically impossible for us to successfully have this event on campus. So thankfully, there has been a very gracious local church that has invited us with open doors to be able to host our event there.
That's awesome.
We'll be at the Birchman Baptist Church tomorrow at 7 p.m.
That's awesome. So we're going to actually be playing this after. So for the people that missed the event, kind of tell us why you're going to college campuses and speaking, and really what the nature of what you're trying to do.
So I feel like if we want to change our culture for the better, of course we have to address what happens in the business world and in law to combat things like gender ideology. But you also have to change the hearts and minds of the people, especially the young people who are facing the consequences of these ideologies, the absolute most out of all the generations. And I have met many young people who have had to deal with transgenderism in different ways. Obviously, the other detransitioners who have been harmed by the treatments directly, as well as families, siblings, and people who have had people like Riley Gaines, who have been forced to have their sex-based spaces invaded, who have lost a fair playing field in their sports, and people who have lost their jobs speaking, or opportunities just speaking out about the dangers of this to our world and in their own personal lives. And I want to make it so that people my age feel like they're compelled to speak up, and that they live in a culture that makes it possible for them to, without serious repercussions for their personal life. And I want the future generations of children out there to not have to go through what I have.
Yeah. So will you take us back and tell us your story? Kind of start at the beginning. Was it you were 11?
I was 12 years old when I started to become confused about who I was, especially in regards to my femininity. And growing up, I was the youngest in a big family in a bit of a small town, California. I was a bit of a tomboy, especially the older I got. I just felt like I related a lot more to my older brothers and my male peers in school. And really, there was nothing quite abnormal about me. Sure, there were incidents where I was being bullied, and I kind of preferred my time to be spent like on my own, just drawing or reading books or playing video games. But there was nothing about me that made me wrong or sick or anything. But as I moved through sort of the natural difficulties that come with puberty, I was insecure about the way that I looked. I was insecure even just about the fact that I was a girl and that I would have these big responsibilities as I grew up into a woman, especially around my body, my sexuality, and the things that would be expected of me as a woman. And I think that really for any young woman who's growing up, that's something, the daunting nature of all of that is something that we all have to face. But I was not really close with any of my female role models, and everything that I would hear about my future as a woman seemed to be, it was kind of depressing almost. Like, I'm going to have periods for basically half of my life, and then I'm hearing all these wrong or misrepresented things about like female sexuality and the fact that we can give the gift of life. I never learned about it being a gift. It was always something to be avoided, to be afraid of, something that would be a burden on me as a woman and on my body, and that it was just a series of suffering. Mm-hmm. And with that being the message I was given by so many of my female role models that I was looking up to, why ever would I want to pursue any of that? Why would I ever care about being feminine, especially because I didn't really feel like I fit in the mold? Eventually, that insecurity became a bit of an inward search for meaning elsewhere. I was about 12 years old when I got my first phone and I started using the internet, social media. And from there, I discovered a community of kids that were very similar to me, that expressed a lot of these very similar feelings about growing up, about going through puberty, but they seemed to become so happy by living this false life. And because I was so young, I didn't understand the falsehoods or the lies around it. I just saw that, well, supposedly there's this group of people that is happy. They found their community, and there is a bunch of science to back this, entire medical organizations that are backing this. And I thought, well, maybe this is the answer for me. So at 12 years old, I began to call myself a boy, and very quickly afterward, the medicalization followed.
Wow. Was that part of a school counselor, or kind of how did from your parents, school counselors, like who all adults were involved that were supposed to be protecting you instead of chose the other?
I think my mom and dad did a very good job at pushing back against this idea. They wanted to, they knew that I was their little tomboy, their little baby. They knew that I was far too young to be making any major lifelong decisions. But they wanted to allow me to be comfortable in my own skin and express myself within age-appropriate boundaries, I think. Every kid, I think a lot of children, they go through a phase where they want to express themselves differently, like through a new hairstyle or through a new style of clothes. And they were fine with that, but they had never really thought of this before, especially when it came to raising their own kids. I don't think any parent expects to, frankly. Yeah. So they decided the natural next step would be having me see a therapist to hopefully get to the bottom of this. And unfortunately, that was not what happened. When the moment that the psychological and medical field got involved, there was a veil that was placed between me and my mom and dad. They didn't know what was being discussed or what I was really feeling or what I really wanted to say to them. And the doctors were keeping secrets for them. And they were so frustrated. They really wanted to get to the bottom of this. So they spoke to the doctors themselves, and they were fed lies upon lies upon lies, that this was not a phase for me, that this was a part of me that I could not change, that would not change, and that I knew what I wanted. Yes, at 12 years old, and that if I wasn't given exactly what I wanted, which involved permanent medical procedures, they threatened my life to my mom and dad. They told them that it's going to be a matter of life or death for your kid, and if you don't say yes to these procedures, she is going to end her life. And this is not just a one-off case. This is protocol for these doctors. They get parents to say yes to things that go against their godly instincts to protect their children. They leverage the single greatest fear that any mother or any father could have, which is outliving their children. And I don't blame my mom and dad for saying yes. I feel called to honor them.
Of course.
Not just because it's a commandment, but also because I know now that they didn't want me to go through this. They wanted to protect me as best as they could, but they had so few resources. And so the doctors administered me 2 different drugs to start with, which was a chemical castration agent to block my puberty. And shortly after that, I was given a weekly dose of high-dose testosterone. And because these drugs are so powerful, I spent most of my high school career with people knowing me, my teachers and other students and my friends at school just knowing me as a young man, because I genuinely did look like a 14, 15-year-old boy. And I ended up going through a surgery just after my sophomore year of high school with a double mastectomy. And that was the major turning point, when, partly because of how cruel it was, but also because I was very close to entering adulthood now, that I did not want this. This was damaging me, both physically and in my spirit. And I wanted to become a mother. I wanted to have children of my own and build a family of my own and get married one day. And I would not be able to have a happy, healthy family life if I continued going down this route. So I decided that I was going to stop, and I didn't know what it was going to look like from there, but I was going to get better.
At the age of 16?
Yes, which is not a choice that any 16-year-old child should be forced to make for themselves. No child should ever be put in such a position. Right. And that's exactly why I decided to start speaking out a year later after that. I was still in high school. I was still in my senior year, but even as such a shy kid, even as somebody who is like super socially awkward and struggling on top of all that, I felt compelled to use my experience and the experience that I went through with my family for good, to repurpose it and to help other children, to help other families, to help anybody who's struggling in their life in any way.
I mean, that is what you've done, and I'm so grateful to have met you and to give you another platform to share. So to parents out there who are watching this and saying, how can I advocate for my child, prevent something like this from happening? I mean, is there any advice that you would give them?
So I think as a preemptive measure, every parent in this day and age should research this and then eventually teach their children about this in an age-appropriate manner. Because if we, as the primary influences in our child's life, are not vigilant, and we don't talk to them about the evil in the world first, eventually an outside influence will take our place. And that's exactly what happened with me. My mom and dad were in a place where this still was a bit of an obscure ideology, and the public, for the most part, did not really know about what was going on behind closed doors in our institutions. But now there are so many stories like mine that have exposed all of that and pulled back the curtain. You now have human stories to put a face to on the damage that this causes, especially to children and to young people. And so many testimonies. It's ultimately, you are the person who knows your child best and what information they might be able to handle and what information they may not be, whether or not it's appropriate for them yet. But it can start with conversations as simple as, the rainbow is being misused. to mean something that it doesn't. There are people out there who are using it not to represent God's covenant, but evil that is going around in the world. There are people out there who are confused about the way that God has beautifully and lovingly made them. And we have to have compassion for them. We have to meet them where they're at. But we cannot falter in telling them the truth. And for parents who are already dealing with their children, facing this confusion, I think the first and most important thing that you can say to them is, no. You are not the opposite sex. You are never going to become what you were never destined to be. And we are not going to allow you to go down this path because we love you and because we don't want you to get hurt. And what should follow that is guiding your children through this confusion, asking them questions about where this is coming from, whether they're being influenced by someone who believe this to be true, or whether they might have some insecurity or some deeper source of hurt. And of course, depending on what stage of childhood your kid is at, like, they're not always going to be able to easily put that into something that they can communicate. But show your child that you are there for them. That, yes, you don't think this is right for them, but you love them the way that they were made in their mother's womb, that you are there to protect them, that you are there to listen, that you won't get angry at them for talking about what they're struggling through, but tell them the truth alongside that.
Yeah, I think about just saying the words, God made you, you, and he made you man, or he made you woman, he made you boy, he made you girl, and just reiterating that design from our Creator. Because at the end of the day, like, we all want something that looks to an outside world outside of ourselves, right? Like, I think we were all designed with that God-sized hole in our heart, is the way I've heard it described.
Right.
So as Christians, obviously, we know that, but I think as humans, we are looking to something bigger.
Right.
So can you tell a little bit of your story becoming a Christian and just your faith through this whole journey?
For sure, yes. I mean, I think for everybody, but especially for young people who are naive and new to the world, there's this temptation to chase yourself, to chase what you want and what your idea is of your identity. But if all you're looking for is yourself, you're always going to hit a wall. Our ultimate identity comes from God, our Father, our Creator, and our relationship with Christ. And when I made the decision to stop transitioning, that wasn't immediately clear for me. I think that it was by God's grace that I even had the opportunity to realize that I was being harmed, especially at such a young age. But I still had a ways to go. And it wasn't until I started speaking out publicly that I actually started to believe in Christ. Now, I'd been raised in a pretty atheistic home. My mom and dad we stopped going to church as a family after a while. And so I was kind of left to figure out my beliefs around the world, my spiritual beliefs and my worldview pretty much on my own terms. And I think that's a trap that a lot of parents in their generation, and even a lot of younger parents, fall for, in that they think that, well, I think it's best if we let our child figure it out and let them do that independently of us. But I think it makes it so that your child doesn't have a foundation under them. If they don't have a faith, they're going to have a hard time orienting themselves, especially as they get into their teenage years and they start to go through the hardships of really growing up. Mm-hmm. And that certainly was the case for me. It was transgenderism that filled that void. But once I was back out of it, I had to start to really think, what am I here for? Why do I wake up every day? What is the purpose of my life? And at first, I just assigned that to repurposing my testimony and my pain to help this community of children and young people who have been hurt, to prevent history from repeating itself. But as I've traveled across the country and as I've spoken to so many people and to so many different communities, it's really becoming clearer, especially now more than ever, that the battle that we are facing is not just gender. It's not just ideology infecting our institutions. This is spiritual warfare that we're in the midst of. And if we want to defeat it for good, we really have to suit ourselves up in God's armor. And it's become especially apparent in the last few weeks just what we are facing as a country, as a world.
Yeah. It feels like the church has ignited, if you would, since Charlie's assassination. But the darkness is also clamoring for every bit of ground that it can get. And so it almost feels like there's just like the spiritual is kind of coming into the reality of our world in such a bigger way. And so
it's no longer just in the spirit and in the mind. It's becoming material.
Yeah.
I mean, we as Christians are in a genuine period of oppression right now. For years we have been harassed, we've been put in danger, we've been arrested for following our faith. But now it's getting to the point that we are being killed in our own places of worship and while evangelizing.
That's right.
But in order to combat that, we can't cower.
That's right.
We can't make the choice to just fade into obscurity. We have to fight for what we believe in.
Amen.
For our sake, for the sake of our families, our communities, our country, for our culture, and because we're called to.
Yes, we are called to. And obviously all of us here stand in that with you. And so those watching are kind of many of our members. We call them the Patriot Mobile family. How can we be praying for you as you enter this next season of speaking out even more? Because I know you are on the front lines, and you obviously have an X on your back, and you're saying, this isn't right, what happened to me isn't right, I'm going to stand up for other kids. But how can we be praying for you in this coming season?
Man, that's I think there's a lot of things that I can answer that with, but at times it can get really grueling. Like right now, as we speak, I'm towards the end stretch of a 3-week-long expedition, and I haven't been home in a long time. I haven't seen my family in a long time, but I've just been on the battlegrounds, and I love doing it. I love doing what I'm called to, but it takes a lot out of me. Especially after Charlie's death, it's been hard to eat. It's been hard to get proper rest in the midst of all the darkness and the evil that's going around. But every now and then I get little glimpses of why I fight and little moments of beauty in the midst of it all. And so, I pray that hope, that beauty just stays there in the back of my mind in spite of everything, that I keep up my energy levels, that I remain with the mind with good discernment, with grace in my heart for these people who, they're not our enemies. It's never men who are the enemy. These people are lost just as I once have been. And many of them only know darkness. They don't know God. And that's exactly why we have to continue fighting.
That's right. To share the light. Chloe, you are a remarkable young woman. And I'm honored to know you and to have had this time with you to share with so many more people just a little bit more of you. I've seen you and heard you a few times, but you are just a gem. And I pray that the Lord continues to shine bright through you to all the places that you speak, whether it's, TPUSA chapter, a college across this country, or a legislature trying to, prevent what happened to you from happening to other children. I just pray that you have energy and that the Lord just continues to go before you in all that you do. And thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you guys for joining us for this podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode.